Ooh, now that's a spicy title, huh? For those of you who are somehow unaware or have forgotten, Derek Chauvin is obviously the guy who killed George Floyd. Okay, so I guess this was over a year ago at this point, but I was watching parts of the trial, either on Destiny or Hassan's stream, I can't remember which one. And I think it was around the time he was being convicted. My memory's a little hazy on this, but I just remember the camera panning to Chauvin's face, and for like a second, he looked so sad. I'm not gonna lie, I did feel like a pang of sympathy. It just came over me for a second. You know, this was a guy who was staring down the barrel of his life being completely flipped, like in that moment, right? He probably never envisioned that in his future, right? Being a convicted murderer. You know, imagine that you've done something bad, right? And then everything, you have to suddenly pay the consequences for that. Like everything starts crashing around you. If you've ever experienced anything remotely similar, like, I don't know, your parents catching you doing something or something like that, right? Like that feeling is so garbage. Like it feels so shit. Now take that and probably amplify it by like 1 million, and that's probably what he felt. And yeah, that's where my mind kind of went to, and I felt bad for the guy. You know, this is like basically his life over, and he's like become one of the most hated people in the world. Now you might argue that it was deserved, or there was like good reason for it. And now obviously look, what he did was heinous and at the very least like incredibly negligent for like another person's life. And if not, you know, most likely it was just like insanely fucking violent. Obviously I'm not defending him like stepping on a person's neck for 8 minutes, right? Of course, for all the losers that are gonna be like, oh, did you feel sympathy for George in that moment as well, blah blah blah, like, and yes, obviously, like that should go without saying. All right, I feel like I'm qualifying myself a lot here just so I don't give off the wrong impression. Back to the story. But yeah, anyway, yeah, so I was watching this on stream and I wrote that in the chat. I wrote like, man, not gonna lie, I feel kind of bad for him. And I have never gotten that many replies, that many ats in a Twitch chat before. It was just like almost like a wall of people just telling me like, what the fuck, feels weird, man, and like, dude, what is wrong with you? Like, bro, get some help. This is like the replies I was getting. And I was like, man, is what I just said like that crazy? I wasn't saying that he shouldn't be convicted or anything like that. Just in that moment, I felt kind of bad for another human being whose life is over, and I felt like I was watching someone come to terms with that. That was like a weird feeling. I think my mindset comes from a place almost of like self-preservation, because I don't think I'm so special that I could never in a billion years be that guy. Given different circumstances, you know, that might be me. I don't fucking know. Again, to make myself clear, that's not to say what he did wasn't bad or that he's just some misunderstood poor soul or anything like that. Maybe he's a piece of shit, okay? But generally, when people act like in really weird ways, I try to think of like, I try to put my mind in a place of like what is the situation where I might do something similar? I was thinking like, okay, if I was brought up a certain way, if I had a certain view of myself, if I had a certain view of the person I'm dealing with, if I'm a police officer in that moment, and I had a certain set of experiences, like I could imagine like being either fearful or vengeful or having some sort of strong emotion that makes me do that in a moment. I mean, it's a stretch to make me get there, but I can imagine it, I guess. And I don't think that's a bad thing to do. But it feels like so many people don't have room for that kind of thing in their brain. You know, I replied back to a few of the people, and I legitimately got maybe like 20 replies that were very similar. Like, oh, how can you say anything even remotely sympathetic to this person? All I want to hear is this person bad, this person bad. Thankfully, I eventually got like a couple of supporting messages in the Twitch chat. Like, oh, I get where you're coming from, and it's good that you feel some empathy even for people that are, you know, ostensibly pretty bad. Like, I don't think this is a hot take at all, and I think a lot of people can intellectualize it that way, but when it comes to like actually applying it, people lose their minds. Like, oh yeah, we should be sympathetic and empathetic. I think a lot of people only say they agree with that. And the thing is, like, empathy or sympathy or whatever, it's not particularly useful if you only apply it to those who are already exactly like you. Obviously, there are limits to this. You know, I find it hard with people who are truly narcissistic or antisocial. And by antisocial, I mean like antisocial personality disorder, not a nerdy introvert, someone who's asocial, right? Or like if someone tries to come kill you and your family, you know, I'm not saying like in that moment you need to stop and try and sympathize with them and consider their life journey or some shit. But generally speaking, even if other people do like horrific bad things, I don't think we should think of them as like complete monsters. At least not all the time. You need to have a little bit of a chink in your armor. You know, let some humanity seep through. Otherwise, you'd never be able to understand why people are the way they are, or envision a world where they might be different. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I've been watching a little bit more of Hassan Piker lately, and man, that guy is so bad at this. Like, I now think that his audience is legit just full of people who want like their neat little home, like a nice little community where they can jerk each other. To anyone who's not like already super ideologically and dogmatically bought into his side already, he's never moving any of them. Unless they're like a normie who doesn't really care to actually think about any of this. They just like the community he's built and like looking at a pretty guy. Because he doesn't seem to understand how others work, and he doesn't seem to try to like put his brain there. Like he demonizes people who disagree with him like so fucking hard. Like he uses way too many lefty buzzwords and blanket labels against others. Like sometimes it's just these word salads like, oh, you're a transphobic, racist, hegemonic, imperialist, Western, white supremacist, Karen power structures. Like he gargles out this kind of bullshit, and it's like, bro, no one other than people like already self-avowed socialists and like Z-zer pronoun using people knows what the fuck you're even saying. And you know, being able to put yourself in other people's shoes and attempt to understand, especially those who are quite a bit different to you, that is a skill. That is a really important skill for the position that he's in. So you can communicate clearly to them in a way that they might then agree with you. Or even if they still disagree, the conversation is somewhat productive. But he just does not seem to have it. That's not to say you should never be mean, but like even when you're being mean, there's a way to do it where they can understand what you're saying more, like speak their language, you know? Oh god, it could be so frustrating watching people like this, because all I can think is like, man, you're a net negative, bro. And that's so sad for someone who ostensibly I should agree with a lot more. Anyway, a big main channel video I might be working on is about Gamergate, because while that shit was going on, I wasn't really into it. Like I didn't really pay attention to it much. I feel like right now there are two very different narratives about it depending on like your ideological point of view and how you look at things. You know, some people claim that it was all about like ethics and game journalism, shitty practices in that space, and other people are like, oh no, it's all about like sexism and harassment against women and shit like that. That's become more of like the mainstream narrative now. At least that's what Wikipedia claims. And I want to see to what extent that's true, to what extent that first narrative might be true. Sort of like do an investigation from a person who has a relatively blank slate on it, who's kind of neutral on it, who didn't really get caught up in the hoopla back then, just to see like where the facts are and where I eventually lie. And I might make like a retrospective summary / I don't know, some sort of video about it. That's been what I've been kind of looking into lately. Because even though I wasn't into it at the time, it has definitely influenced my content in some ways, right? Seems to have had an ongoing cultural impact. So it should be some funny memes. Let's see. I was also thinking about doing a video about Modern Warfare 2, like a big sort of critical examination of that game, because again, that was a huge cultural touchstone for I think my generation. It was one of the few games back then that really transcended the medium of gaming, you know. And there's still loads of memes about it, you know, the COD lobbies and all that, and that was something I was very much into, and I played an insane amount of that game. So I thought that would be fun to make as well. Obviously, I'll upload like shittier videos here in between too. But yeah, see you next time. Peace.